Hoax by NuekerFilms Part 4. Worried. About what? The hairs on my arms started to stand up. That it won't stop. Ellipsis. She paused again, as if what she was about to say was something hard to accept. I woke up and saw a pentagram carved into a tree in my front yard. Ellipsis. I talked to Caroline, and she said you did it to her too. Her lips trembled so much that it overwhelmed her words, forcing them shut as a tear welled in her eyes. Ellipsis. I wouldn't do that. Trust me, Ellipsis, I said weakly. I knew I had to come clean to somebody, especially with the fact Elizabeth had now been roped into this too. Something's going on, and I just need to get to the bottom of it. What do you mean? I tried to coerce myself into spilling the truth, but I just couldn't bring myself to spark more tension. I don't know yet, Ellipsis, I whispered more to myself offhand than to her. Well, have fun, I guess, Ellipsis. Elizabeth sped off before I could say another word, almost as if she were ashamed to have appeared so pitiful. As her taillights sailed out of sight, I turned my attention back to my front. My gaze drifted back to Isaac's upstairs window, and I could see a dark shape silhouetted by a bedside lamp. The figure stepped into another light, and it illuminated Isaac's full body. He stood directly in front of the window, holding something flimsy in his hands. After another moment of goggling at what he possessed, Isaac turned around and placed the object to his face. I silently observed as he slipped the thing over his head, a mask, and returned to the window, as if he were a crowned royalty observing his subjects. The glow of his lamp grazed the side of the mask, and I could make out some vague features from where I sat. It resembled the face of a clown. A thick and greasy orange mane cascaded down the back of the head, and the deep eye sockets were accented with light blue diamonds surrounding them. The signature red smile bore a single row of off-white jagged fangs. Isaac's features were entirely eclipsed by those of the mask. Whatever the purpose of such a disguise, it seemed to compromise Isaac's person, as he took on this other persona with such ease and glee. In another instant, Isaac ripped the mask from his face and stuffed it inside his backpack laying on his bed. He swept the bag up and was out of sight before I could register what he was doing. After another minute had passed, Isaac opened the front door to his house and cautiously stepped into his car and started the engine. I scrambled to do the same, attempting to flee from sight before Isaac could pull out onto the road. Luckily, as I looked back up, Isaac's headlights were headed in the opposite direction. I took a moment to breathe. Had I really just let my paranoia overtake me to such a degree that I actively feared what my friend might do to me? Surely everything that had transpired in the past week could pass as entirely circumstantial. If I was to believe the evidence at face value, I still lacked a clear motivation for Isaac's rather bizarre actions, and so the validity of my claims had fizzled. There was no way I would be able to delve into Isaac's psyche just by doing this. I desperately wanted to forget tonight had happened altogether. Without another thought on the matter, I turned my car around and just began driving aimlessly. I must have driven around for hours, blankly staring at the limited view in front of me, too uneasy to think about anything. Despite my best efforts, I felt a push within me to see firsthand what Elizabeth had described to me. I then sped in the direction of Elizabeth's house, taking advantage of the long drive to actually collect my thoughts. I danced around the fear and doubt in my mind until those thoughts eventually subsided with the emergence of Elizabeth's gravel driveway. I pulled up closely behind her truck and stopped. The rustic red in my headlights stood out against the blanket of black, which had washed out the vibrant greens and oranges and yellows of the surrounding forest. The air was heavy and was persisted by a looming aura of unease, as if I wasn't truly alone. This paranoia was finally getting to me. Something inside of me urged my body to walk up to the door, to finish the conversation that had unceremoniously been cut off earlier that night. I wanted to be able to talk about what I had seen to someone I could trust. So maybe I could put to rest all this speculation and gain some peace of mind, or at the very least confide in someone, and gain the confidence to accept what was unfolding before my eyes. I killed my engine and approached her front door, my mind empty of all thought except for the need to talk, to form some reasonable explanation for this. But I couldn't make it past the large dogwood tree in her yard. Just as Elizabeth had described, carved prominently in the trunk was a crimson pentagram, Isaac's now signature mark. An icy chill surged through my body, as the whole reality of the situation was beginning to take shape. The effects of my reckless prank were spreading, causing mental distress to people I cared about, and I wasn't ready to fully accept that. I retreated back to my car. If this all was as dire as I was perceiving, Isaac would continue. I promised myself that I would confront him if he did, which I feared was inevitable. I found my suspicions to be warranted the next morning. I woke to the sound of the morning news anchors resonating from my living room. They reported 2 new attacks from last night by the same mysterious person, each victim claiming to have woken up in the middle of the night to find their backyards torn to shreds and a carving of a pentagram left somewhere on the property, whether in the grass, onto a window pane, or in one instance, directly into the side of the house. The town reacted accordingly, the mayor issuing a town-wide curfew, restricting all citizens to staying indoors after sundown. The local news had also coined the name, the Night Stalker, for the person or people believed to be responsible for terrorizing the town. The Night Stalker? Are they serious? Isaac wailed as he took another bite of his lunch. I simply stared at him, unsure of whether or not he was legitimately more concerned about his new title in the ongoing investigation. I mean, it's not as dumb a name as the Phantom Menace or anything like that, but they could have done a lot better. He stood unwavering in his egotistical stance. I was hoping they'd go for something a little more mysterious and threatening like the Zodiac Killer, but what can you do? Grant and Cameron laughed alongside him like mindless lackeys, while I stayed quiet. I couldn't tell if they were just blindly following this regime of his. All I knew for sure is that their scared demeanor from yesterday had not deterred them from laughing this off. I so desperately wanted to believe that they were just obliviously swept up in the novelty of this character we had created, and weren't infected by the same list that Isaac had. I found myself mentally fleeing from the images and thoughts that had been supplanted in me from the previous night, but as I dove deeper into my pursuit for normalcy, the more I couldn't escape this. Elizabeth, likewise, seemed to be going through the same emotions. She had been growing noticeably more distant since that night at her house, choosing not to sit with us at lunch, or not lingering after rehearsal to talk. It was only by pure coincidence that I spotted her in the school courtyard between classes. "Elizabeth," I called out. She paused for a moment until she noticed it was me calling, and she picked up her pace. I called out to her again and she stopped long enough for me to catch up to her. "Elizabeth, what's wrong? Can we talk about last night?" She looked at me stupefied, almost embarrassed to be seen with me. "It was just that one-time thing, huh?" she mumbled under her breath. Before I could respond, she started to pick up her pace again, but I took her hand before she could walk away. "Elizabeth, I swear I am not a part of all of that not anymore." I pulled her back towards me slowly, reassuringly. "I thought you said things would die off by now." Her lips started to tremble, causing me to flare up defensively. "I didn't know this was going to happen." Elizabeth reacted similarly. "What? That Isaac was going to turn into some crazed knife-wielding psychopath?" She paused to catch her breath. "First me, then Caroline, and Rand, and Cameron, and now he's going around doing this to total strangers? My family is scared to death that someone is going to break into our house one night and kill us all, and there's no way I can just tell them what's actually going on without bringing all of us into this mess. Meanwhile, he's going around and feeding on their fear, and it's disgusting." "Wait, so you think that Isaac really is the one behind all of this? Like everything?" I asked, more to reaffirm my own hypothesis than anything. "I don't know. Things are adding up, and honestly, is there anybody else we know that would actually go through with this?" Elizabeth made a good point. "Well, regardless, he's taking this all a bit too seriously. I'm scared if we don't step in, he's going to take it too far. That boy has issues, I can see it." "I know what you mean, I spoke more softly. "So, what are we going to do? Can you just go talk to him?" In an effort to appease Elizabeth as well my own lingering apprehensions, I agreed to the task, somewhat reluctant to face this head-on. After the final bail that day, I rushed out to the parking lot to catch Isaac, hoping that talking to him face-to-face would bode well, easing him off his pedestal. I stopped several paces from him, and watched as he marched towards his car with that same gusto I saw the night before. His underlying fire made me hesitant to continue, but I wasn't about to let my fear consume me. My monster needed to be stopped before it got more out of hand. "Isaac, hold up!" I yelled as I made quick pace in his direction. Isaac turned to face me, his innocent jovial smile only distracting me for a moment. "Hey, man. What's up?" I made no time for introductions as I shoved him against his car. "Night Stalker? What the hell, man?" I shouted in an accusatory way. "What about it?" His tone shifted, becoming more aggressive. "We agreed to drop it." "What happened to that?" "I know and I did. Cops don't know a thing, and we are free to go on as we please." "Stop lying to me." I couldn't believe he could lie so convincingly to my face. "You're doing this on your own still. Why?" Isaac's perplexed look slacked once he realized I'd caught on to his schemes. "You have your hobbies, I have mine," he smirked. "Like you said, it's no different than rolling a house, just with more of a rush. You should see the looks on their faces when they see what I did." Isaac contorted his face into one of exaggerated terror, mimicking the people I'd seen on the news dozens of times. "This is nothing like rolling a house, Isaac." He stepped back, genuinely surprised that I was upset with him. "And Caroline, Cameron, Grant, Elizabeth, why did you visit them?" A shiver ran down my back as I spoke. "I don't know what you're talking about." Isaac's face held a look of genuine confusion. "I didn't tell them it was you, I didn't want things to change between us." I backed away for a moment. "This needs to stop, though." He cut me off before I could finish my sentence. "What's the big deal? It's not hurting anybody." Isaac leaned in closer, almost whispering at this point. "Grant and Cameron came up to me earlier. They said they wanted to give it a face. His tone turned snarky, as he and I both knew he was gaining the upper hand, and no matter what I said, he wasn't going to stop. What do you mean? Give what a face? The Night Stalker. We're gonna use her black robe and my old Halloween clown mask and make a fake sighting video later by the soccer fields. It'll be hilarious. I shuddered at the mention of that mask. You know, if you weren't as much of a tightwad, I might have asked you to tag along ellipsis plus. I think Grant and Cameron are a little pissed at you. I don't know why though. I am not being a tightwad. I shouted. We had our fun, but it's gone too far. Trespassing. Possibility for assault. What next? Too far? Noah, we're just getting started. You've gotta admit this is exciting, right? I get such a rush. Isaac, this isn't about you anymore. I snapped, remembering what Elizabeth had said. People are afraid of something they can see, can't prepare for, and worst of all, something they don't know what it's capable of. Isaac's sparkle dulled, and his face fell stern. Oh, not this shit again. Isaac rolled his eyes. Now you and Riley Grace both are riding my ass about this. Isaac, I'm serious, I pleaded. This is bigger than we realize. Just look at what it did to Maggie. Do you not feel anything? Maggie just doesn't know how to take a joke. Come on, Noah. Ease up. Isaac reached out to me with his hand. I am not going to ease up. I swatted his hand away. Don't expect me to dig myself deeper into this mess just because I am your friend. Isaac was growing legitimately dangerous. This Night Stalker persona had triggered within him a release of some sort, and he was slipping further and further into this delusion by the second, thinking that everything was okay. Okay, whatever, Isaac said as he sat down in the driver's seat. Then don't expect me to listen to you either. I'll do whatever I want to do and neither you or Riley Grace can tell me what's right or wrong. I'll teach you guys how to play along. And with that thinly veiled threat, Isaac closed the door and sped off, nearly running me over in the process. I watched as a brief and spiteful and childish thought I had once slowly slip outside of the realm of my control and mutate into a monster that I couldn't stop. Where my obsession with this facade stopped, Isaac's had kept going. It was now my responsibility to stop this from going any further. I ran to my car and dialed Caroline's number as I sped off towards the soccer fields. Before she could respond, I began spilling everything, slightly shaken from my confrontation with Isaac. I told her everything that Isaac had just told me, and that I couldn't just lie dormant on this issue any longer, and that I needed her help if Isaac was going to listen to what I had to say. I knew that her take charge sort of attitude would be what would get her to come along. We met several minutes later at the soccer fields, the gray overcast sky tainting the dying grass of the fields and the chipping paint on the goalposts, neither of which helped lift the feeling of unease that was quickly settling on my shoulders. Off in the distance, I saw Grant and Cameron making their way along the gravel trail that led into a patch of woods. Grant was donning the black cloak that Isaac had described to me, and he was holding in his hand the mask. I took notice of the smaller details. It was littered with little bumps and holes, either by age or design. The face was more elongated up close, the flaming orange hair stood out amongst the desaturated backdrop of the forest. The eyes of the mask were very sunken in, same as its gaping maw of yellow rotting jagged teeth. Caroline and I continued our approach as Grant began his performance. He trudged through the thick wall of trees with irregular steps. I heard Cameron call out to the mysterious creature and right on cue, Grant turned in his direction and emerged through the tree line, prompting Cameron to turn around, start running in the other direction. By this point, we had reached the start of the trail, and we managed to catch Cameron by his shirt before he ran too far. God, you scared me. I took in the irony of that statement. Cameron then looked up at Caroline, who was glaring back coldly, and his tone shifted instantly. What are you two doing here? Cameron pocketed his phone, but not before posting the video on Twitter. Cameron, what the hell is wrong with you? I spouted, almost instinctually. The damage was already done, and I couldn't stop this from spreading. Now Grant had become privy to our presence and was beginning to make his way over to us. We were just having some fun. Geez, Noah, this whole thing was your idea in the first place. Ellipsis. Cameron nudged my shoulder in an attempt to make me acquiesce to their antics.